Hello, Year 11. It's me again, Mr. Boff, with another video, this time covering your Easter homework. I've apologized for the slightly echoey environment I'm in, and also periodically the light will go on and off. So, not wildly professional. Won't someone give this man his own studio? So, our focus today is on an essay, and it's focused on school uniforms specifically. Here is the task. You've got this printed off as a separate sheet. So the task is school uniforms limit individuality, are expensive for families, and belong to an outdated, outmoded, old-fashioned, and therefore no longer relevant idea of education. In today's diverse society, young people should have the freedom to express themselves through what they wear, as indeed I'm doing through this delightful grey hoodie, without being judged or punished for their choices. Now, potentially a new form, write an essay, so very similar to an article minus the title or headline. So write an essay for a school writing competition in which you argue your viewpoint on whether school uniforms should still be compulsory. That is, you've got to wear them in schools today. So it's the old classic school uniform question or task, which I believe they've never actually asked, but it does feel like a very exam board AQA type task to demand of students in paper two. So we're going to do what we always do, which is to deconstruct the task at the word level. So school uniforms. So what do they provide? Well, they provide structure. They're a representation of identity. They provide a visible sense of community. But they also potentially limit individuality. They prevent self-expression through clothing choices. Okay, everyone wears the same thing. It's not very individual, is it? They can be expensive. Are they more or less expensive than coming in school every day in a different outfit? Probably not, but they can be very, very expensive, although there are plans in place to make really heavily branded school-specific school uniform less and less a thing in Britain. Outdated, so no longer kind of in line with or relevant or right for kind of 21st century values, particularly where we would celebrate diversity and individuality, perhaps. Freedom to express themselves. It's that balance, I guess, between balancing, individual desire and fashion choices with boundaries, and then the idea of being judged or punished. So, schools obviously have punitive sanctions in place for students that don't follow the school uniform policy. Would there also be forms of judgment and even social punishment for students wearing their own clothes? Quite possibly. So there's questions there around fairness, consistency, idea that school uniform is limiting, or perhaps even if we want to push it a bit further, is oppressive. But there are other aspects of the debate that we'll need to look at. So really, I think what underpins this question is the tension, the conflict really between structure and freedom that exists in education. So you're writing an essay. What on earth is an essay? Now, an essay is where we formally and in a controlled way convey an argument. So we need to be really clear in our argument, and we need to come down on one side of the debate or the other. It isn't where we're just going, oh, some people think this, other people think that. No, we're setting out rhetorically to convince the reader in this essay writing competition of of our particular position, whether we are pro or anti school uniform. It does need to be balanced and thoughtful, though. I'm going to mention a few things on the next slide about what an essay is not. Think about it like this. We're trying to convince a really intelligent and thoughtful reader. So, what do we want to be doing in order to accomplish that? Formal tone. This is going to be serious. It's probably going to be the most serious, formal, and academic style that we adopt in any of these transactional writing tasks. Our ideas and our arguments need to be developed logically. We do need to acknowledge, and it's obvious when it comes to school uniforms, some people think they're great, some people think they're oppressive and terrible. We're going to at least need to acknowledge and deal with those opposing views, whichever side of the debate we ourselves adopt. And we need to sound measured, not emotional. Now, measured there, nothing to do with getting a ruler out. Measured there means calm, rational, logical, thoughtful, kind of in control of our emotions, not doing some of the things that we're saying we need to avoid here. So we're certainly not ranting. We're not going on in a kind of emotional rant or diatribe about school uniforms, whether we're for or against them. Remember, our audience, if we're talking about an audience for a school writing competition, an essay writing competition, it's going to be teachers, adult judges, educated readers, people who are going to be interested in ideas and how we can convey carefully our arguments and command those rhetorical features that we've looked at many, many times across your Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 lessons in English. So we don't want to be using slang. We're definitely not ranting. It's not a diatribe against or forced, against school uniforms or against those people who think that school uniforms are terrible. And we're not engaging in ridiculous emotional hyperbole or exaggeration. So, some questions. We need to then turn the words of the question into thinking questions, and it's that thinking that will then generate our arguments. So, to that end, do uniforms create equality? Now, you might say, yes, they do. Everyone looks the same. That's equality. But actually, maybe the fact that people can't express their individuality, is there a sense in which actually that isn't a kind of true equality at its essence? Do they reduce pressure and judgment? Is that pressure and judgment coming from teachers? Is that pressure and judgment, if it's own closed day, students wearing their own thing, is that coming from other students? Do they allow students to focus on what matters, education in schools, or are they a distraction? Is individuality, should it always be a priority? Is individuality so important all of the time and kind of special conceptually as a value? Is that something that schools should really worry about prioritizing, certainly when it comes to appearance? And then what should education value the most? Okay, is it structure or is it freedom, or is there a way of finding some sort of balance between the two? Okay, now what I've done here is just laid out. So I would recommend that you pause this, particularly this moment, to sort of weigh up the different arguments. I'm not going to read this out. There are convincing arguments for school uniform, and there are also powerful arguments against school uniform. Britain is an outlier compared to other countries around the world when it comes to school uniform. In our country, culturally and historically, school uniform is the norm in schools. That is not the case in other countries, in other foreign countries. And you would say, does that, there are various educational systems around the world that seem to be very, very good. I'm thinking, for example, of, say, Estonia, or a few years ago, Finland, for example, heralded for the quality of education that students receive there. They are not historically countries that kids go to school wearing school uniform. It doesn't seem to have affected their ability to learn. At the same time, maybe there are UK or Britain specific reasons why we should still maintain school uniform. And that's for you to think about, and that's for you to come to a particular sort of position or judgment on. Okay, step 3, from questions to big ideas. Now, I'm going to be pro school uniform. So there are certain patterns that emerge for me, which are that without school uniform, visible differences in wealth and status, therefore, become more pronounced. They become very obvious. You see that to a certain extent on closed day. And I know, and there are studies that show that students feel social pressure. They can be distracted by how are people perceiving my clothing rather than actually focusing on, what is Mr. Boff telling me about paper 2, question 5. So the apparent freedom that wearing your own clothes to school seems to afford students can in reality create inequality. It can make differences in wealth and social status painfully visible for students, and it can create almost a sense of competition where people are competing to wear more fashionable clothing, certain branded clothing, and so on. That can cause a great deal of stress for students and also for parents and carers. So my big ideas are on the board. These are my big ideas, and I'll be referencing these throughout the rest of the video. Again, pause, read, think about this. These are big ideas that are basically pro-school uniform. If you're going to argue the opposite, that school uniform is oppressive and restrictive and we should abolish the wearing of school uniform in British schools, well, that's fine. You're going to need to develop your own 2 big ideas, okay? My key message in my essay will be that education should be about fairness, focus, and a sense of community and belonging within schools. I'm going to argue that uniforms provide that. What we shouldn't be allowing schools to descend into is competition around how do you look, what branded clothing are you wearing, oh, have you got your on clouds on, or are you wearing your Monterex hoodie tomorrow? Those sorts of things, we could argue very fairly that that will be a distraction from the real business of what a school is there to do, which is to educate young people. Okay, again, I'm giving you sort of general evidence and general kind of evidence sentences you can use if you wish to support the wearing of school uniforms, basically the status quo, things as they are now in the UK when it comes to schools, most schools having a very clear and strict school uniform policy. So these are bits of evidence, and I've kept them generic to make it sort of realistic for the exam, where you're not going to be able to go and do some research ahead of time. These would support, obviously, that pro-uniform argument. So if you're going to go with that, pause here. However, if you want to challenge the pro-uniform argument, that is, you are against or anti-school uniform, again, there is some evidence that you can be using and the kinds of sentences you may wish to use in your essay when you come to write it up for your Easter homework. Okay, so again, you can pause the video at any time just to go back over this material. Okay, now we've got our kind of core arguments. Now we make that bridge over to the planning grid. It is our generic blueprint for success, the planning grid. The introduction, where we use the language of the question. An anecdote, I'll give you guidance and sentence scaffolds for all of these. Rhetorical question, dystopia with the extended metaphor, the kind of consequences of, for example, if we're pro-uniform, we are going to lay out the consequences of abolishing school uniform as obviously particularly damaging. Two big ideas. Obviously, the problem-solution structure fits within our big ideas. We repeat that rhetorical question, and then we have that conclusion and call to action, like what do we want the reader to do? Okay? So I'm now going to just quickly go through, because again, you can pause the video as and when you need, what we're doing. So introduction, we use the question. And my introduction uses the language of the question. Notice, though, this is something my class did, I know other classes did this too, where we're not answering this as if it's a paper one question for evaluation question. We're not opening our essay with, I mostly agree with the statement that school uniforms. No, we don't start like that. That's not how an essay starts. That's not how any transactional piece of writing should be starting. But we're going to use the language of the question to help us structure our introduction and sentences. So in today's diverse society, debates around school uniform continue to take place, with people feeling very strongly on the issue. While some argue that uniforms limit individuality, it's important to consider. And now we're beginning to turn towards our overall argument, which is the necessity and importance of school uniform. And then we lay that out clearly. Uniforms play a crucial role in reducing those visible markers of class difference, or differences in wealth and status, while also contributing to a shared sense of community and togetherness within a school. Okay? Then we use an anecdote. And the anecdote, new paragraph, makes it real. It takes that kind of abstract debate, are you for or against school uniform, and makes it human. It makes it relatable. It grounds our argument in real human reality rather than just leaving everything in the realm of ideas, okay, which is not always that convincing or engaging. So what I've done here is I've invented a close friend. I do have some close friends, but this is an invented one. And the idea that someone, as an adult is kind of looking back and essentially sort of saying school uniform, when it was on close day, that was a source of a great deal of anxiety. And that's just a sort of one-off day periodically throughout the school year. Were this to be the norm, that is non-school uniform every single day, there'd be a great deal of anxiety and concern around what am I wearing tomorrow? How are my peers going to be perceiving that? Am I going to be subject to bullying or mockery for the clothing choices that I make, and so on? Okay, and that's the kind of angle that I've gone down when it comes to my anecdote. Right, isolated rhetorical question. This is about prompting then reflection, as well as funneling the reader in the direction we want them to go in. Okay, so a really good rhetorical question. The whole point of a rhetorical question is the answer is obvious. Okay, we pose a question where the reader or the listener, if it's a speech, has to effectively answer the question in such a way as to accept the core foundations of our argument. Okay, so is fashionable self-expression more important than inclusivity? The implication there is no, it's not, and that's why school uniforms are important, because they promote inclusivity. Inclusivity is more important than self-expression within a school environment. Therefore, we need school uniforms. So a good rhetorical question has that kind of funneling effect of pushing the reader or listener in the direction we want them to go in the persuasive direction of our, in this case, essay. Right, extended metaphor. Very similar to the extended metaphor last time. This idea that without school uniform, those kind of firm foundations that school uniform provides of community, of kind of professionalism, of seriousness and calm, that will be eroded. So it's a kind of like erosion-based extended metaphor, very similar to the extended metaphor that we employed in the leaflet. Then, big idea one, we present our first clear argument. Those are the sentence scaffolds. We covered much of this material, and indeed this material here, these scaffolds relate back to, if you go back to the slide a few minutes ago, where I lay out the kind of pro-uniform arguments. Evidence and emotive plea. Okay, there we go. Research suggests it's all about credibility and urgency. Research suggests that uniforms can reduce bullying linked to appearance and also wealth and kind of status. For many families, it's about reassurance. It's about a kind of sustainability, really. It can be very, very unsustainable, demanding in all sorts of ways, financially, even emotionally, for students to be wearing their own clothes every single day. It's not just about clothing then, it's about community. It's about professional learning environment. It's about making sure that students aren't unfairly picked out because of the particular background they come from. It's about creating an inclusive learning space within schools. Okay, solutions then. Rather than removing uniforms, we're basically making the argument here that uniforms need to be made affordable. Schools should make sure that uniforms aren't incredibly expensive, that the aspects of the uniform can be bought cheaply from supermarkets and so on, so it's inclusive in terms of people's financial means. The Department of Education, in concert with schools across the country, must work to. This is the idea that people in positions of power and who can actually enact these changes do so. Big idea two is about focus and discipline, community, togetherness, discipline. Reassuring certainty of uniforms, yes, but also focus and discipline, not being distracted by, what brand are those tracksuit bottoms, or what trainers are they wearing, but actually focusing on the matter of learning, what's obviously the whole purpose of our school system. Expert voice and imperative, educational research, what does it highlight the importance of? Obviously to do with uniforms. We've got a survey, take students at their word, recognise the value of school uniform in helping students feel safe, comfortable within schools. And then we conclude, okay? Don't forget, prior to this, we repeat, I've already given you examples. We go expert, voice, and imperative. This is our final big idea 2 paragraph. We repeat the rhetorical question, and then we're into the conclusion, okay? The only thing to perhaps explain there is, while school uniform is often unfairly caricatured as. So, what we're saying there is unfairly caricatured. Now, a caricature, if you've ever had your caricature done, it's a cartoonish version, a sort of simplified cartoonish version of your portrait. It's not like a photorealistic portrait in oil paint of your face. A caricature is going to be done in a matter of minutes with probably like a marker pen, and it's going to look a bit like you, but a cartoonish version of you. If you say, you are caricaturing my argument, or you are caricaturing my argumentative position, what you're saying is you are presenting a cartoonishly simplified version of what I'm saying, and that is not fair, okay? You aren't accurately and in detail depicting my argument fairly. You are creating a kind of cartoonishly ridiculous simplified version of my argument, which is obviously ridiculous and therefore easy to mock, suggest is stupid. Obviously, shouldn't, your argument doesn't stand. And when we're saying that, we are effectively saying you are straw manning my argument. You are presenting an unfair depiction of my argument, and therefore you're making it sort of easy for you to suggest that my argumentative position is sort of ridiculous and therefore is not one that other people should accept. So while school uniform is often unfairly caricatured as oppressive, authoritarian, and in the most sort of emotive outbursts, some kind of fascist regime, the fact remains that school uniform, whatever, what can appear as an unfair, restrictive imposition is, in reality, the only way we can create truly inclusive learning spaces, that kind of idea. Schools are places of learning. Anything that distracts them from that central goal must be, is an obstacle to be overcome, must be, eliminated. The answer is clear. School uniforms, part of our country's proud heritage when it comes to our educational system, must remain well into the 21st century. Okay, are not outmoded, whatever it might be. Okay, and just then some final reminders. Follow the structure, follow the scaffolds I've given you. Make sure that writing is clear and controlled. What that means at the end as well is proofreading, checking, full stops, capital letters, sentence boundaries, commas. Have I used apostrophes here correctly or not? Does my sentence make sense? Have I paragraphed accurately, or have I accidentally forgotten to put paragraphs in? And also then finally, number 3, have I adapted my writing to meet the needs of the intended audience? Is this formal, precise, okay, controlled, not descending into a rant, for or against school uniform? Because if we do those 3 things that I've laid out on the slide and in this video, this is how you will achieve the highest marks in paper 2, question 5. And bearing in mind, this is worth 40 marks, okay? We want to do as well as possible, because how we do in this question is going to really make or break our overall exam success in English literature. And that, under 25 minutes, is today's video. I hope you find it helpful. Use those scaffolds. Make pause when you need to, of course, and have, importantly, a productive but restful, relaxing, enjoyable Easter break with your friends and family. Come back refreshed, raring to go, because we're into, let's be honest, it's going to be intense, it's going to be full on, but we all know if you work hard, you are all capable of really achieving. All right, so enjoy your Easter, and I will see you in April.